What if the secret to success wasn't just talent or hard work, but unshakable confidence? Welcome to Grasp Confidence, the podcast where visionary thought leaders, speakers, and entrepreneurs unlock the mindset and strategies for lasting success. I'm your host, Tara LaFon Gooch, CEO, two-time best-selling author, and international TEDx speaker, and I can't wait to help you step into the most powerful version of yourself. Let's dive in. What if the future of healthcare isn't just clinical, but deeply rooted in connection, humanity, and true understanding? Today, we're joined by Dr. Krishna Vedala, a dual board certified physician in internal medicine and obesity medicine, who is redefining patient care by bringing compassion, clarity, and connection back into healthcare. Get ready for a conversation that will change the way you think about health. Krishna, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so excited about everything that you're building. You're a physician. You know, I work with a lot of doctors, and I love doctors. I will say that. There's so much passion that you bring to this. And it's not just about healthcare, it's not just about even medicine, it's about that humanity aspect of it as well. And I think that's really important conversation to have because we're all going to be patients one day,
Mhm. Yeah,
right?
def definitely. Yeah, no one can deny that part.
So, why was this important to you to start your podcast, Connected by Health? And by the way, everybody, if you're listening to this podcast right now, go ahead and follow Connected by Health on Spotify and Apple so you don't miss the next episode. But why was that important to you to get started and share your voice?
Well, for me, it was important, mostly because at the beginning of 2025, when we saw, uh, the cutting that was being done financially to a lot of research, but also to healthcare in general, and to me, I felt that was not the way to go, and the reason for that is health is the foundation of any society, right?
Mm.
It's people can have money, but when you don't have good health, no one really is going to be able to enjoy that money or that wealth, right? And so that is kind of where I was really moved by the cutting of funding, and I felt, okay, we need to emphasize this point because it's really important for us to continue investing in our healthcare system, but also in our own health. And I was also a part of this awesome leadership program here in Oklahoma City called Leadership OKC. And I'm part of Class 43, best class ever is what we call ourselves. But Leadership OKC is basically a development program for leadership where you have people coming from different sectors of the economy, whether if you're in medicine or if you're in education or the energy or banking fields. And you have all these people from diverse backgrounds, just amazing people, amazing leaders, amazing individuals with great backstories. But they all come together and we get a chance, an opportunity to learn and look at our community here in Oklahoma City. And Oklahoma City is a growing, vibrant city. It's really changed compared to what I remember it being when I was young. And I'd grown up in Oklahoma City all my life. And also, we're the home of the NBA champions of the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Woohoo.
But what we got to see in Leadership OKC was we meet like once a month and we get a chance to look at the different sectors, whether if it's health, whether if it's education, whether if it's a nonprofit industry, whether if it's the news media industry. And one of the things I noticed is, despite all of these classes we went to, health is connected to each and every one of them at some point. Whether if it's education, you need a healthy student population, right? Because that's the future. That's what we're building, right? That's what we're trying to do. Whether if it's energy, you need to look at the health of the workforce, right? If you don't have a good workforce that is healthy and that is ready to work and to meet the physical demands, you're not going to really have a great energy industry. Whether if it's the news media industry, misinformation is becoming a huge issue, and when you don't have people that are educated and that have dedicated their lives towards health, speaking up, you're going to be out there with more misinformation. So in some ways, health is connected to a lot of different things in our and not just in our economy, but also in our society. And that's really what got me going. And that's where I came up with the name Connected by Health, right? Because everything is connected to health at some point. You said it amazingly well. We're all a patient at some point. That's exactly,
Mhm.
and that's why we're all connected by health, because if you don't have a strong health within society, and if you don't have a strong healthcare system, that's when you start seeing society break down, and that's important. And I'm also a fan of history. I don't, although my background is in medicine, history is one of my hobbies. And when you look at every civilization, once it starts abandoning the interest of its own people, the health of its own people, when you start seeing those civilizations start falling apart. And again, health is the foundation of a strong society. And that's really what I'm trying to do. It's a concept that we all agree on, but we don't really talk about it that often. And my hope is with our podcast is to help understand people that we are so connected by health, and there's so many different things that come into play, and so many different sectors of the society is connected to health, and we can't ignore we can't ignore not investing in health, because we have to. And if we don't, we may not see the repercussions today, but we may see them down the road, and I would like to do my part in avoiding that.
I often think, I mean, you and I, you have really young kids. I have a 10-year-old. I often think, what is the future of healthcare, right?
Mhm,
Because AI is coming, it's really changing the game. You and I have talked about that.
mhm,
There's just so much happening in healthcare right now. I know a lot of physicians personally who are friends of mine and clients of mine who have left medicine. I have heard of plenty of instances of physician suicide. It's a really tough industry.
mhm.
And it breaks my heart because, going back to exactly what we were talking about, we're all going to be patients, but what does the future look like? And I love how you're also interested in history. I'm a history nerd too.
Yep. Mhm.
And, history does tend to repeat itself if we don't pay attention. So I don't want that to happen in healthcare because that would just be a terrifying reality, Krishna, right?
It would be, and I'll be the first one to admit, it is a I wouldn't describe it as a frightening time by any means, but it
Mhm.
is an overbearing time in healthcare.
Yeah.
Whether if you are a physician, a provider, or a nurse, or if you are working on the admin side, or if you're working on the finance side,
Mhm.
there's a lot of changes that are happening. But we have seen this in the past, when with the advent of electronic medical record system, the digitalization of healthcare, there was always a similar concern. I remember I
Mhm.
kind of tell people that I worked my way up in healthcare because I started off as a medical assistant for a cardiologist, and then I also worked in medical billing, and I worked in cancer research. And I was there when we in our cardiology office, we went from paper charts to an electronic medical record system implementation. And that transition was not easy. At the time, we saw certain physicians retire because they did not want to have
Yeah.
to adapt. But at the end of the day, though, this is the lesson I give to everybody that's listening. Adaptation is key. They say, when it comes to Darwin's theory, survival of
Mhm.
the fittest. If you look at that, that really applies to even our own individual lives. You have to adapt. You have to be able to navigate through the challenges. And that's really what defines life. One of the examples I like giving, and again, this is where we go into history, Kodak. I know a lot of kids these days may not really know what Kodak is, and I'm not old. I'm not that old. But Kodak was so synonymous with photography for most of the 20th century that
Mhm.
once the turn of the millennium, we don't even know what they're doing. They're actually, I think, looking at. If I remember correctly, they were in the news a couple of years ago about looking at vaccination development. I think they were looking for a contract with the Trump administration at the time. So it's really interesting to see how failure of adaptation on behalf of Kodak and as a company that was synonymous with photography is now nowhere to be found. And so you have to adapt to changing times, and that's just the nature of life in general. As far as what the future holds, I think it depends on how we come together. I think it depends on our ability to be able to come up with real solutions to real world problems. But it also really depends on our ability to adapt, utilizing data, evidence based medicine. Because at the end of the day, no matter what side you are on an argument, at the end of the day, the data doesn't lie. It's very different to, well, I mean, let me rephrase that. It can be done to where you could spin it your way, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's only going to say one thing, and that is something you can't really argue with. So I think healthcare has a future that really is in our hands. And again, that's where we go back to our podcast. We need to invest. We need to continue to understand and come to the realization that health and healthcare is really the foundation of society. And if you want to make a difference, and if you want to continue on a pathway of continued growth and prosperity, you have to invest in health.
Have to. It's so important, and I feel like it's so overlooked, but why is that? I mean, why? Why is it so reactive?
Hmm.
What, like, I don't understand it. It's really, to me, it should be one of those things that we should be really proactive about, but it seems like everything is just so reactive in healthcare, and I'm not blaming the healthcare industry. I don't know who to blame. I don't know what to blame. It just seems that way.
I really think at the end of the day, it really comes down to this what I like calling the politicization of healthcare, and we see
Oh,
this quite a bit across different, not just in healthcare industry, but across different industries too.
yeah.
For example, in energy, when you're looking at fossil fuels and coal versus green energy, and I really think, sadly, that's kind of where we're looking at even with healthcare. And the sad part is at the end of the day, there really shouldn't be two arguments or two sides of an argument, because
Right.
in healthcare, we're all trying to do one thing, which is to preserve and save life, right? We're not trying to make any points. At the end of the day, we do what's right for the patient using practices that have been studied well and that are safe. And there's really no two sides to that at the end of the day, but that's kind of what we have come to as a society. And we are planning on releasing an episode down the road about social media reform. And I think it's something that we really need to look at as a society, because misinformation is something that is dangerous, not just in terms of providing false information, but people have power, and when you say things that can put other people in danger, I think it's a little bit frightening to live with in a society that doesn't take accountability seriously. So we do need to look at that in terms of social media reform, but politicization of healthcare, I think, is really what has gotten us to this point. Because of that, we're not really able to come up with solutions to the problems. There is the willpower, there is the desire, but no one really wants to come up front and say, okay, well, I'm wrong, or we're both wrong. Let's move forward. And I think if you could do that, you could see so much change for the benefit, so much change for good. Unfortunately, I feel like we're only seeing that in cases of great danger or in troubling times. Specifically during the pandemic, I think we've all kind of put aside our differences to some degree and decided we need to come together. And I hate saying this, but do we need another pandemic again? I hope not. But we were able to develop a vaccine for COVID-19 within almost a year of the pandemic, and that is unheard of in history, right? And why we're able to do that, we're able to do that because we pooled our resources together, because we came together, because we understood that many lives were at stake. Our whole society, the foundation of our society, again, was at stake. And I don't want there to be something like that again. But if that is the case, then I think we really have to look at ourselves as a society. So if we could put aside the politics, if we could put aside the political leanings, I think
Mhm.
there's great good that could be done. I just don't know if that's going to be today, or again, unfortunately, in case of another troubling time like another pandemic.
That's a good point. You know, we really do need more unity.
Hmm.
There's so much division right now. It's never been more apparent to me than, like you were saying, around the COVID pandemic and all of these things. Recently, it's become, I feel like, even more divided. I don't know, and it's like we forget so quickly, and that's why it's so important to be students of history as well, and to be a continuous learner, develop leadership skills, self-leadership skills, and realize that it's it's not a right wrong thing. It's a coming together thing. And there's nobody that has all the answers, but if we can come as a community, as a collective, and kind of bridge that gap of communication, I think that would solve so much problems. And not just in healthcare, but globally, like the entire world, right?
No, definitely. I mean, look at what we're seeing right now, just on a global scale.
Yeah.
Who would ever thought, the Gulf countries? That's where they've become in the last 2 decades a major economic hub for the global economy. And now, just a simple, I wouldn't call it simple, my bad. A strike on one country has essentially caused a standstill in not only in their local economies, but also in global energy demand with the Strait of Hormuz and then the blockade around there. And I think this goes back to when globalization started, right? Around, it's been there for a long time, but really it peaked up right after World War II when we were able to really have what I call a true sense of a global economy. Globalization is something that has given many people prosperity. And I'm not an advocate for globalization whatsoever, but what it has done is anywhere in the world, if something happens, we're all going to be impacted by it. And that is just the nature of the beast right now. Uh, People should care about what's happening halfway across the world, whether that is on the Pacific Ocean or the Middle East or Europe, because it impacts everybody. We don't really talk about this, and this wasn't really talked about a lot. But at the beginning of the Ukraine war, we saw a helium shortage, and so MRIs became much more difficult to conduct because they're
Mhm.
reliant on helium. There, think at the end of, I believe this was during, even during the pandemic itself. Look at the way that the global economy came to a standstill because China, which has basically become the manufacturing hub of the world, essentially they stopped producing, and so we ran out of so many things. Whether if it was protective equipment for people in the healthcare industry, whether if it was simple goods that we once thought were available are just no longer available. And so when you're looking at globalization and in a global world that is not just in the sense of economics, but also in the digital side, everything is going to matter to everyone, no matter if that is in a small island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean or if that is in the United States. And we have to come to terms with that, I feel like. And again, with our podcast, we're not wanting to just stick with only people on the healthcare side. We do have some upcoming guests that are going to be looking at economic development. We do want to have people that are on both sides of the political aisle because we need to come together, come up with real solutions to these issues, but also help people understand that healthcare, again, is not just one industry. It's not just a simple matter of being in the clinic or the hospital. It's so much outside of the health industry itself. And when you're looking at what's happening right now across the world, I just can't imagine the horrors that we have seen with wars, and what impact it's going to have to the health of those areas that have been affected. But hoping the world will get back to some kind of normalcy, but we have to wait and see.
Yeah, we have to wait and see. And as parents, you and I again are both parents. It's it can be nerve-wracking, right? To watch the news and, you hinted on social media earlier, and that's a reality. A lot of people are on social media all the time. They're not sure what's real anymore, right? With
Mhm.
deep fakes and AIs and all of this stuff and misinformation and people that say they're an authority of a subject but aren't, and they're just spreading misinformation. all of that can infect not only our physical health, but also our mental health and our peace too. And I think it's so important to look at this at, from a holistic approach as well, that your health is so much more than just a chart and numbers on a chart. It has something to do with that, but it's more encompassing than that as well. What do you think about that?
I do agree. I do agree that the health is not just a matter of simple numbers or medications or a matter of a claim on your insurance bill, right? There's
Right.
so much more to it. I think part of one of the other reasons why I've decided to go forward with this podcast is because I want people to be able to hear what people from the what I like calling the conventional medical side, right? At the end of the day, no matter where you're at, the goal has always been the same, which is to help people get healthier, help people live longer, and help people live right, and to save
Right.
people's lives. I think the aspect right now, and this again goes back to the politicization of health, and I think now the battle lines are kind of clearly delineated, which is you have this conventional healthcare side that I feel has been really impacted by misinformation, but also by the lack of effort on their own side to reach out and to communicate. And then you on the other side, you have what I like calling the wellness side, and they have done a really good job of communicating with people. And I feel
Mm,
that the intent on both sides is the same. It's to save lives and it's to
yeah.
do what they can do to help improve the quality. But the issue is I think there can be great mistrust,
Mm,
and the way around that is kind of doing what we're doing with this podcast. Reach out to the community, reach out to individuals, try to help them understand that you care, that you want to gain their trust. And I think that's something that the conventional side has not done well. I'll be the
yeah.
first one to admit it. And that is part of the reason why I'm trying to do my part with the podcast. I have always been honest with my patients. A, um, I am not really a what I would call an influencer, right? I am a physician. I have spent my entire adult life doing nothing but learning, well, not just in medical school, but in all my other jobs and titles that I have done before coming into medical school. And I'm a big believer in evidence-based medicine. That is what really helps save lives, but doing so not at the expense at the patient safety or patient life itself. And so that is what I have learned from all my years of education. I think the issue is there needs to be some kind of bridge between both sides. And I think you're already kind of looking at this to some degree with probiotics, which, for a
Yeah.
while was considered taboo. Oh no,
Was it
we're
really?
looking at this. To some degree it was.
Wow.
But
I didn't know that.
you look at it even in obesity medicine, we've looked at certain bacteria strands that actually tend to be more higher in number when you are obese compared to other bacteria that tend to be higher in number when you are not obese. And so clearly there is some bridging that's already being done. And I think there's something that we could really look into. We're
Mhm.
trying to have an episode with Dr. Tina Agbawasi from Memphis. She is an infectious disease doctor, but she is a great supporter of the microbiome, specifically within the gut. And that is a huge component because a lot of people don't really know much about it. Even I, as a full-fledged physician, don't really know much about it. But I think that's where the concern I have is there is a evidence-based perspective towards it that I
Mhm.
think will actually be utilized for the greater good. And I have personally seen a more of an influencer perspective towards it that I think they're getting onto something, but I don't necessarily think it's applicable to everyone, and nor there is it cheap. And that's the other thing that we have to look into. So I think the bridge is developing, and I think you could really look at the next decade being that bridge putting together. But it's going to take time, and it's going to take people coming together and communicating. And again, I keep harping on to the politicization of healthcare, which is unfortunate, and it's not what we want, but it's here. And our way to move beyond it is to sit down, talk, communicate, and do what's right for the patients. And from my perspective, that's looking at the evidence and the data, because at the end of the day, the data doesn't lie, no matter how you want to put it. From other people's perspective, I don't know, but I can do what I can do, right? And that's my hope with this podcast is to look at that and to bridge all of these different aspects that I'm involved in, whether if it's AI,
Mhm.
data, leadership, obesity medicine, or primary care, and to do what I can do to help people understand investing in health is important. And part of that is doing it in a way that will not cause patient harm.
I love that. I heard a saying once, and it's so resonant. You have a million problems until you have a health problem, and then you have one.
Yes, it's true.
It's a good
It is
saying,
ours.
right?
One of the personalities I really admire out there is Steve Jobs, and his ability to really take Apple really from the brink of bankruptcy to where it's become, which is not just a technological company, but something more, which is impressive. But when you look at his own personal history, he was diagnosed with neuroendocrine tumor, and at the end of the day, I feel that he didn't necessarily follow conventional guidelines, and he was trying to look at more alternative modes of treatment. And everyone has his or own or her own decision to make. But I've always wondered, what if he could have saved him? Where would Apple is doing well. No one's gonna have to say they're not. But where would he have taken that company, and what other significant impact would he have made on our lives? People don't understand how sometimes success on something, whether if it's vaccinations or the iPhone, people tend to forget the significant role that they played in changing human lives. I mean, the iPhone in your hands right now does basically multiple things that we had a dozen different gadgets do, all in one device. And whether if that is a calculator, whether if that is a GPS device, a phone, a camera, a video camera, or even just this daily calendar schedule. I mean, it's remarkable that the iPhone was able to do all of that in one small device, and we don't really think about it today. Today we're like, "Oh, okay, well, where's my phone? All right, I need to charge it." But I've always wondered what would happen if Steve Jobs would have actually been able to survive the neuroendocrine tumor had he actually taken more of a conventional route. That's just something that I, as a fan of history, like yourselves, what if the biggest what ifs in history? Where could he have gone to next, and what more of an impact could he have made on our daily lives?
Mm. I think about that with Alexander the Great as well,
Oh,
gosh,
yes.
that talk about it, right? I mean, he was how old was he? 30? He
It was
not he wasn't, right? Was he 33?
33 when he died in, Babylonia, and that's, of course, something I've always thought of. I'm not gonna lie, the thing with Alexander the Great, which is kind of revolutionary for his time, and I don't wanna get into too much of Alexander the Great, we could talk all day about him.
I
I
know
know
we
because he was so in advance of his time, which was to
yeah,
really combine cultures. Now, the
yeah.
way he did it was probably not something that I would ever endorse, which is through violence and wars. But when you look at his ideals of globalization, but in a way in which cultural fusion was the way he wanted to do it, and I was
Mhm,
always curious what he would have done because he had many of his Macedonian generals marry into Persian noble families, and anywhere he went, he really set up all those cities. Of course, he named them after all himself. That's okay, and maybe a few after his favorite horse and his favorite dog. But at the end of the day, you really have to give him that. That here, almost more than 2 millennia ago, you had someone that was really thinking on a scale way beyond what everybody else was thinking, and they hadn't even invented, um, you know, many of the things that have come later in history. But that's impressive. I mean, even without gunpowder, Alexander the Great conquered literally half of the known world to them. And you always wonder if he had lived, what would we have actually have a Roman Empire? Would he have actually had the development of Islam or the growth of the British Empire? Because who knows where we would have been if Alexander the Great actually had survived into his 60s and where he would have gone, conquered Western Europe. There were plans to conquer Arabia, apparently, the Arabian Peninsula. Who knows? What the greatest what ifs in the world. But we
I
could talk
know.
a whole day about Alexander the Great and my fascination with some of his ideas. But
Yeah.
well, we
So
don't have enough time.
fascinating. So fascinating. You think about, I mean, gosh, yeah, we could go any direction there, but I wonder how he died. I don't know if has there ever been, I mean, I don't think his body has ever been discovered really, so we're not 100% sure. It could have been malaria, it could have been
Mhm.
poisoning. We don't
Yeah,
really know, right? But
there's a lot of different theories. Alcohol poisoning is one.
mhm.
Malaria is one. Poisoning by some of his generals is one because people forget his generals were really tough, tough people that owed a sense of loyalty to him because that was just the greatness of his personality. But as soon as he died, you saw how his empire was divided literally into five different pieces, and his body was actually supposed to go to Macedon, but eventually Ptolemy the first of Egypt, who was actually a Alexander general, and who rumor has it could have been a half brother also, ended up capturing his body, and it was his sarcophagus was actually in Alexandria for a long time, and now it's lost to
Mhm.
history. So, um, but just so much history that could have changed with the survival of one individual, and you
Yeah.
don't really ever think about that.
Oh, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. Krishna, any final, like, words of wisdom, advice for people listening to this that are interested, but they're not sure where to start in their journeys of health and deepening their relationships with understanding that there's more to this than what meets the eye? What would you say to somebody that's like that?
You know, life has thrown a lot of obstacles and a lot of setbacks at me. And there were times when uh, I had given up on my dream of becoming a physician. There were times when I never questioned my ability to do it. It was mostly my ability to make it that far. I've always knew deep down, you know, if I make it, I'm going to do I'm not trying to speak highly of myself, but I always knew that I was going to do well just because of my personality, my drive, my determination. But whether if you're wanting to go into healthcare or any other field, don't forget dreams are not meant to be just dreams. They're meant to be reality, right? Their dreams are hard to kill, but that really depends though on who you are and what you want to do and how much you really want something. And so, for a lot of people out there that are listening, if there is something that you want to do, put your mind to it. It'll happen. You will face obstacles. You are going to face failures. But at the end of the day, life is not defined by failure, right? Life is defined by the attempts that you make to get to the point where you get to, right? And a wise man once said, and I don't know who it is, but I would rather try and fail than fail to try. And that is the same concept that I've taken all my life, whether if it's with medical school. I didn't get into medical school till my third attempt. Whether if it's looking at this podcast, I had been thinking about this podcast for a long time, and I did my research, spent the time, and with your assistance, Tara, you know, I've made it this far. But life is a journey that is not going to be easy, but you really have to persist through the rocks thrown at you. And once you get through that, you will notice how rewarding it is. I do occasionally go back and think of the days when I didn't get into medical school on my second attempt, and I was just and I have no shame in saying this. I cried. I really didn't know what the future held for me. But through the support of my mother, my brother, my dad, my family, through some of my friends and great mentors, I just can't name every one of them here, but great mentors. You know, here we are, right? And so, if there's something you want to do, don't hesitate. Do it. It'll get done.
It's great advice. In the words of Yoda from Star Wars, do or do not, there is no try, right?
Right. That is absolutely true, and I love how you put that in with Star Wars, and for those of you, that will eventually be listening to my podcast, you will see a lot of random pop references, mostly through Star Wars, Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, a little bit of music here and there, mostly with, Michael Jackson and the Beatles, and you'll be surprised. Yes, I do listen to the Beatles,
I love the Beatles.
you know, there were, the '60s were such a turbulent time, and that's when they were the best. And but a lot of their songs, if you really just take a chance to listen to it, you really understand that there's great meaning to it, even now, so many years afterwards. And who knows? Maybe somebody may be feeling about that about Bruno Mars down the road. Who knows? But at least the Beatles had something to them that I don't think I've at least personally, and I'm biased, I've seen in anybody else since then.
Well, Krishna, we certainly have a lot in common. We're both fans of the Beatles. We both love Star Wars and have similar interests in health and well being. So, thank you for being a guest on this podcast today. And thank you for everyone who tuned into this episode of Grasp Confidence Podcast. This podcast is more than just inspiration and motivation. We're really here to transform lives and help people. So, if this episode helped you, if it moved you in some way, leave a review on Apple and a comment with how this episode helped you and transform your life. I read each review personally and love every single one of them. So don't forget to do that and follow this podcast so you don't miss the next episode. That's key. When you follow the podcast, you catch new releases as they come in live. So make sure you hit that follow and subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We will catch you in the next one. Take care.